Anniversary. 2 years ago today, a Capitol Hill police officer called Michael Byrd shot an unarmed woman in the neck. At the time of that killing, Byrd had a documented history of gross negligence with a firearm. He'd left a loaded Glock pistol in a public men's room at the Capitol, which for a law enforcement official is a firing offense. But for some reason, Michael Byrd was still in the force that day. The woman he killed was called Ashley Babbitt. Babbitt was a married 14-year veteran of the U.S. military. She ran a pool cleaning company with her husband in San Diego. Physically, she was tiny. She was also unarmed. Michael Byrd later admitted he had no indication at all that Babbitt was carrying a weapon. She posed no visible threat. He killed her anyway. Under normal circumstances, Byrd would have been fired immediately and charged with murder, which he clearly committed. But that's not what happened. After doing essentially no investigation into the shooting, Nancy Pelosi's congressional police force declared Byrd a national hero, and the media strongly agreed. Byrd went on television to accept accolades and to complain about racism. He was never punished for killing Ashley Babbitt. He was rewarded for it. Ashley Babbitt's mother, meanwhile, got a very different sort of treatment. Babbitt's mother was arrested today in Washington by the Capitol Police. Her crime? Trying to hold a memorial service for her daughter. 2 years later, it's clear that Ashley Babbitt her death is by far the most significant thing that happened at the U.S. Capitol building that day. But at the same time, it is the least talked about event of January 6th. Why is that? Well, because the facts about what actually happened on January 6th disrupt the lies, what they've told you happened on January 6th. And those lies have proven very useful to the Biden administration and to permanent Washington. On the basis of a wholly created myth about what happened that day, the Biden Pentagon conducted an unprecedented political purge of the entire U.S. military. The FBI and various intel agencies increased their control over the American media. And most obviously, the DOJ has been allowed to prosecute and jail hundreds of nonviolent political protesters whose crime was having the wrong opinions. Lies about January 6th, which have been relentless, have enabled some of the most unscrupulous people in our country to make a mockery of our Bill of Rights and to steal our core freedoms. So they can't talk about Ashley Babbitt. Talking about Ashley Babbitt makes it very clear who the real culprits are and who the real threats to this country continue to be. And they're not the January 6th protesters. So instead, they lie about what happened that day, and they do it in the boldest possible ways, without shame and with maximum aggression. Here's Hakeem Jeffries, leader of the Democrats in the House, telling you that 5 police officers were killed on January 6th, when in fact the real total is 0.
We are gathered here to honor their memory and acknowledge with deep gratitude the tremendous bravery of the hundreds of officers who defended us at this citadel of democracy that fateful day. As a result of the events on January 6th, the lives of 5 heroic officers were lost.
5 heroic officers were lost, he said. It's almost impossible to believe that adults could stand behind him as he said that, because everyone in the picture you just saw knows that is not true. It's not a stilted interpretation of events. It's a flat-out lie. No police officers were killed on January 6th, period. Ashley Babbitt was killed on January 6th. But chances are your grandchildren will not know that, because history will likely record the lie you just heard as true, simply because it's been repeated so often. Everyone in authority has said the same thing in unison for 2 solid years. As our thoroughly dishonest Attorney General recently put it, quote, "We will never forget the 5 officers who responded selflessly on January 6th and who have since lost their lives." His boss, Joe Biden, repeated that lie today from the White House.
These people and the people representing those who couldn't be here because they gave their lives for this is incredibly consequential. And that's not political talk, that's historical fact.
That's historical fact, says Joe Biden, as he manufactures history, as he tells lies. They've been doing this, telling these same lies since the very first day, January 6th, 2021, almost like it was a coordinated operation. Remember when they told you that Officer Brian Sicknick was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher?
Officer Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher.
Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the hours-long attack.
They beat a Capitol police officer to death with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the fight.
He died at the age of 42 after he was bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher.
That's not true. And in the end, thanks to the medical examiner in the District of Columbia, we learned the fact, which is that Brian Sicknick died of a stroke well after the January 6th protests. He was not beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. But that did not stop their lying or even slow them down. Joe Biden just awarded one of this country's highest civilian honors, the Presidential Citizens Medal, to officers working on January 6th. And that would include the officers who opened the doors of the Capitol building to the so-called insurrectionists. The officers who let them inside and then were rewarded for it by the President of the United States. What's going on here?
There you go. Here's the question. This is why we picked this clip. What is going on here? Now, here's an important fact to remember. And you need to remember this. Always notice the semantics, no matter what news broadcast you're listening to, and the words they use. Like in this one, Taco is very flat out. He used the word kill, murdered. Those are words to listen to. And then he played all these lies that came out of the mouth of the President of the United States, the media, the Speaker of the former Speaker of the House just handed the gavel over to Kevin McCarthy, Hakeem Jeffries, that was a pitiful display. We didn't even want to show it to you of what he said before he handed Kevin the gavel. So now here is what you really need to be concerned about, what was said there. They purged the U.S. military after the event. That's a serious concern when it comes to national security. What are these people doing? What are the heads of the military doing? Who are they loyal? Are they loyal to this? Are they violating their oath? What are they afraid of? Are they afraid of more Ashley Babbitts, maybe? Think about that. Let that sink in. So, what is the whole point of all these lies? Well, let's see what else is concerning that event.
Or can you know about the very obvious clandestine role of federal agencies that encouraged the events of January 6th? That happened, but its details have never been explained. A lot has still not been explained from that day, despite a committee that was impaneled for more than a year. For example, you remember the pipe bomber who planted explosives outside the Democratic National Committee? Well, those explosives, it turns out, were under a bench at the same moment that Kamala Harris, who had Secret Service protection with her, who swept the building, was there. So how did the U.S. Secret Service miss a bomb sitting in plain sight during its security sweep? Well, we can't answer that because the FBI still, to this day, refuses to release all the security footage. Why? What's going on here? Almost unique among media outlets, Revolver News asked that question.
The pipe bomber even looks at camera to head on, for some reason. It's very frustrating, because we can't see the moment the pipe bomber plants the pipe bomb, but the FBI can. That's because the whole scene should be captured on camera 1 as well, and much more clearly than camera 2. Camera 1 has a clear shot of both benches. If the FBI released the full tape from camera 1, we could see the pipe bomber planting the bomb.
So somebody planted bombs outside the headquarters of this country's two main political parties. That would seem to be a big story, and yet no one ever mentions it again, including the FBI. In fact, the Bureau won't disclose any information about the suspect, not his height, weight, shoe size, anything. So if they wanted to catch this person, wouldn't they be telling you all they can about who it is? But they're not. Why aren't they? And what was Kamala Harris doing there? Why did she lie about being there? We can't answer those questions. We should be able to. Nor does anyone in authority want to talk about Ray Epps. Ray Epps, of course, is the man who was caught on tape encouraging the crowd outside the Capitol, both on January 5th and 6th, to commit felonies by rushing inside. Now, what's interesting is that the January 6th committee, under public pressure, did in the end interview Ray Epps. Now, we don't have all of the committee's records about that interview. We should, but we don't. But some have been released, and what they tell is a remarkable story. In the testimony that we have, the committee coaches Ray Epps on how to answer questions about his involvement. Quote, "I was in the front with a few others. I also orchestrated it. I helped get people there." End quote. Now, Epps admitted that in a text message to a relative on January 6th. He's admitting crimes. He's never been even charged for those crimes. But what's so fascinating is that when those facts came up in his interview with the committee, someone on the committee responds this way, and we're quoting, "I just want to understand a little more your use of the word orchestrated. It sounds to me like at this point, when you sent this text, you had turned away in part because of seeing some things that you didn't agree with. Is that right? Like when you sent this, you were already on your way from the Capitol because of concerns of people taking it in a different direction." Is that the most leading question ever asked in the history of a congressional hearing? Probably. Why was the committee and its members working so hard to help Ray Epps?
Well, there we go with the question again. What's going on here? Think about this. No effort by the FBI Secret Service to go after the pipe bomb suspect. Full tapes have never been released. You would think that, like Tucker said, they would want to catch this guy. They'd want to get the information out there to the public to find out who planted pipe bombs. Why did Kamala Harris lie? No tapes have been released of the pipe bomber, and they have them. No tapes have been released from that day at the Capitol to the public, the full tapes, not the edited tapes that they want you to see. They tried to sway your narrative. So what are our agencies doing? There was no effort at all. And this other question now is, why are they giving leading questions to Ray Epps? And that was obvious the way that was worded, and those are direct quotes. Why are they leading him to try to get the right answers? Well, with that question, let's move on to hear a little more about Ray Epps and see some video evidence.
In his interview with the committee, Ray Epps said he didn't work for law enforcement. Law enforcement, in a very specifically worded answer, clearly thought through ahead of time. The question is, did Ray Epps work or have any contact with any government agency? Did he talk about January 6th before it happened with any employee of the U.S. government? We don't know. We do know that 2 years after January 6th, long after an awful lot of other people have gone to jail for walking around the Capitol building, Ray Epps is still a free man.
Ray Epps, the mysterious man, America's most innocent man, the person who was there on J6, the day before J6, somebody screaming, "Let's go into the Capitol, into the Capitol, into the Capitol," on the FBI's most wanted list until he wasn't. We finally got a deposition from him. We're going to do a refreshment of our recollections, going through the Ray Epps highlight reels, making sure we remember that this guy was, at least some time ago, a member of the Oath Keepers, hung out with Stewart Rhodes, who's currently being prosecuted by the U.S. Department of Justice for being with the Oath Keepers. We're going to go through Ray Epps' final deposition. It's 97 pages. It went about 3 hours and 4 minutes long. This is Ray Epps, right here in the red, big tall guy, standing in the middle of the crowd the night before January 6th.
Tomorrow, we need to go into the Capitol. Into the Capitol. What?
No.
Peacefully. Fed.
Right, so they just fast forward. Another one.
We problems are. It's that direction. Please spread the word.
All right. Okay, but one more thing.
Yeah, so can we go up there? No?
When we go in,
Are we going to get arrested if we
leave
go up
this
there?
here.
When we go
We
in,
don't need to get
Did you
shot.
arrest us all?
there he is, right there. There's another one. There's Ray running up the steps. Running all the way up there. So Ray Epps was everywhere. He was all over the place, except on the FBI's most wanted list after they deleted him. Several different bits of history for our memories. In this clip, you see the FBI had a whole list of people that they wanted. We've got photographs 11 through photographs 20. And in the bottom right, we see Mr. Ray Epps. You can zoom in on that. You can see it right there at the bottom. Ray Epps. Right there. Photograph 16. FBI seeking information, violence at the Capitol. January 6, 2021. Many other people got arrested. Photograph 12 got arrested. Photograph 17 got arrested. But photograph 16, Mr. Ray Epps has been just misjudged. And FBI deleted him. This was a post from Ray Epps in Arizona, and it was an announcement of an Oath Keepers event. That's Ray Epps and Stuart Rhodes in the same announcement. The announcement is for an Oath Keepers hometown buffet in Scottsdale. That was taking place back in 2011. So as you know, Stuart Rhodes, who's identified in this photo, standing next to Ray Epps, Stuart Rhodes is being prosecuted. He's being prosecuted by the U.S. Department of Justice for being involved in January 6th. Says that he was the state chapter president, Ray Epps. So he's on the FBI's most wanted list until he's not. Ray Epps, you can see tall guy right here in black. Stuart Rhodes is in a suit and tie next to him. They're marching down the street in an Oath Keepers procession. Memorial for a young Marine. Walking right together. You see them right there. Handshake photograph of the march. You see Stuart Rhodes right there along with Ray Epps in the background. Actual deposition itself, now that we have an idea of what actually occurred. And it is 97 pages long. It was virtual? They didn't even do it in person? It started at 1:04 p.m. We're going to see it last about 3 hours. Not a lot of time. Now, who was there during this interview? We've got Schiff, Murphy, Aguilar, and Kinzinger. Notice there's an interesting phrase where they say that we'll go on the record at 1:04 p.m. So don't know if that's when the conversation started, but they go on the record at 1:04 p.m. And put a pin in this, because when we get to the end of this transcript, they're going to go off the record right before Ray Epps asks his final question. They say, Ray Epps says, "Can I ask you a question?" And they say, "Sure." And he goes, "Are we off the record?" They say, "Not yet. Hold that question, Ray." And then they go off the record, and then he asks the question. What is the question? We'll never know.
The question.
We'll never know. That was AZ attorney, Robert Genevieve. He does a show daily called Watching the Watchers. He's pretty good. He unfolds a lot for you. He understands the law. So who are these people? I mean, we have video evidence of Ray Epps being there, who's on and off the FBI most wanted list. He's got pictures with Stuart Rhodes, who's being prosecuted. He is an oath keeper, who's actually leading the chapter in the state. It's all evidence, it's all facts. Questions off the record in the committee. Questions and conversations we'll never know what they were. But like we've been saying, there's something else going on here with federal agencies. The Department of Defense, and we've mentioned this in so many shows, has a division called the DTRA, Defense Tactical Reaction Agency. It's formed because it's completely unaccountable to the branch of the DOD. It's hard to trace. No one's got really oversight over it, which is why you got to see the importance of having this congressional oversight. We'll see if they have better luck than Frank Church had back in 1977 with this committee today. Hopefully Thomas Massey will speak up, no matter what kind of pressure they put on him. With that being said, one more question. How many members of the DTRA or any other agencies I'm accountable for were involved in January 6th? There's a question we want answers to. All right. Let's take a look at our next segment here. Watch closely.
Never know.
The question is, did Ray Epps work or have any contact with any government agency? Did he talk about January 6th before it happened with any employee of the U.S. government? We don't know. We do know that 2 years after January 6th, long after an awful lot of other people have gone to jail for walking around the Capitol building, Ray Epps is still a free man. He's never been charged, much less imprisoned in solitary confinement like so many others. Why is that? Well, let's just stop lying. At this point, it's pretty obvious why that is. But of course, they're still lying about it. Honored to have her join us tonight. Julie Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. Can you just give us a couple, since you are the human encyclopedia on January 6th, I would say, a repository of all the information. I mean, just give us a very quick overview of the scale of the law enforcement response to what happened 2 years ago today.
So, Tucker, what we have now are almost 1,000 criminal defendants related to their involvement in January 6th. What the FBI and Department of Justice now is warning is that figure will double by the time that they're done. They believe that they have 2,000 perpetrators of the alleged insurrection, and they are going to continue this manhunt for Trump supporters into this year. And so you had the FBI official this week, the new head of the Washington, D.C. field office, say this investigation will go on for years. So what is this about? This is not about making sure that people who really committed violence, a small handful that day, are brought to justice. This is to perpetuate Joe Biden and the Department of Justice and FBI's phony narrative that domestic terrorists, i.e. Trump supporters, pose a grave threat to this country. It's really shameful. It has resulted in the destruction of so many innocent lives and their families. The FBI continues to arrest people almost every week. And I believe right now we have at least 100 people incarcerated behind bars, either under pretrial detention or serving out excessive prison sentences for either plea deals or being convicted by a jury in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, searching it. At this point, does any honest person believe that the feds were all over this? I mean, parts of this were clearly influenced by federal agencies. I mean, that's not a conspiracy theory, is it?
Well, it's not. And that's why I think it's interesting, Tucker, that in an 845-page investigative report by the January 6th committee, Christopher Wray's name is not mentioned a single time. They didn't even interview FBI Director Christopher Wray. Now, why is that? They also didn't interview Stephen D'Antuono, the newly retired head of the Washington field office, who was in charge of FBI agents, informants, et.cetera. Assets on January 6, 2021.
We were attacked widely by a lot of Republicans, too, for mentioning the obvious, which is the feds had a hand in this. Will we ever know the truth, do you think?
We have to. We now know for a fact, Tucker, because of these trials, that there were informants months before January 6th run into the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, at least 8 informants in the Proud Boys months before January 6th. What were they doing? We have to find out.
A future that's built on freedom, a commitment for a government that is held accountable, where Americans get the answers they want, need, and deserve. Our system is built on checks and balances. It's time for us to be a check and provide some balance. Speaking of committees, we will hold the swamp accountable. From the withdrawal of Afghanistan to the origins of COVID and to the weaponization of the FBI. Let me be very clear. We will use the power of the purse and the power of the subpoena to get the job done.
Once again, notice how there's not one Democrat standing and applauding. They are afraid. They have covered up something that's costing people their lives. Now, let's look at what we just heard. There's 1,000 indictments and expected to double and to go on for years. Let's hope Kevin McCarthy's words are not just more lip service. Like Tucker said, they were attacked by Republicans too. That's what you got to remember. This is what matters. The people in January 6th, from January 6th are being held in Washington, D.C. prison, completely violates their rights under the Bill of Rights, the right to a speedy trial, and then fair punishment. There is so much in there that we all need to learn and become awake to. We got to see why, and we have to find out why. Now, let's conclude this segment with this.
The one person we know for a fact was murdered, killed without justification on January 6th, 2021, was Ashley Babbitt, an unarmed 14-year military veteran. And she's the one person whose name was not mentioned during any of the official January 6th memorials. You wonder how much more this the country can take. Aaron Babbitt has suffered for 2 years because of it. Of course, he is the husband of Ashley Babbitt, and we are happy to have him join us tonight. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on. I have to ask you about the arrest of your mother-in-law by the same police force that killed your wife.
Yeah, I just saw that video for the first time when I was coming into the studio. My phone was blowing up. A little backstory on that. Mickey's actually been in D.C. since the beginning of August. She's been there every day, living in that area, sitting outside the jail at night and protesting outside the Capitol. So I'm not going to say it's a coincidence. She was finally arrested on January 6th, but that doesn't really smell right.
Well, it's beyond on the 2-year anniversary of her daughter's killing. It's beyond. And I've asked you this before, but I have to ask you again. Has anyone in elected office reached out to take your side, to take up your case to get justice for your wife who was killed without justification that day?
It's still the same. Troy Nels, Louis Gohmert, but he's out now. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, I'm sure there's a couple other, Paul Gosar, there's a couple other ones, but it's still that it's a very small percentage.
Looking back 2 years to the day after her killing, what do you make of it? How would you sum up this experience?
I mean, for me personally, I've learned over these last 2 years, it's never going to get easier losing her. It just gets a little bit different every day. And I'm just in full force mode of continuing my fight for Ashley, and that's what I will continue to do.
Well, I hope you prevail. You can't just shoot people and then move on, and I hope you won't let them. Aaron Babbitt, thank you.
This new dump. Do you believe this is criminal behavior when you see this sort of concerted effort and in some of the emails it suggests, Rudy, that, you see work with the FBI, with the DHS, with the Defense Intelligence Agency, having consistent meetings with Twitter and then they are finding ways to sort of suppress President Trump and other conservatives.
Sure,
Why do you believe it rises to criminal?
Well, I think it began to be criminal the day that Hillary Clinton paid for the misinformation regarding Russia. She paid $1.1 million to develop a story to frame an innocent man. When that innocent man became the president and they continued to pursue the story, including every one of those January 6th committee member phonies, who were big parts of this, by the way. It's a joke to watch them put out a report on January 6th when they should be in jail for trying to organize a coup against the president.
Adam Kinzinger was a congressman the other day. Now he's not. He's already found a new job. Where's Adam Kinzinger working? What workplace will get to watch him cry? Amazing news to report tonight. Not really a Fox News alert, but very close. Adam Kinzinger leaves Congress and then someone hires him. Someone literally hired Adam Kinzinger for a job. You may not believe it, but Trace Gallagher of Fox News can confirm it. He was watching another channel tonight when he learned. Trace Gallagher, what did you see?
Well, after seeing its ratings plummet over the past 2 years, Tucker, CNN has informed the world that it will no longer be a far-left media organization and will instead go back to being an unbiased news source, as if there was evidence that CNN was ever an unbiased news source. But to prove that things are changing, CNN has now hired former GOP Congressman Adam Kinzinger as not just a political analyst, mind you, but the network's senior political analyst. Bingo. And it appears to be a good fit, considering the only one who hates former President Trump more than CNN is Adam Kinzinger. Remember, it was Kinzinger who voted to impeach Trump. Kinzinger, who was a member of the January 6th committee, said if Trump was not charged with inciting an insurrection, the future of the country is doomed. And Kinzinger, who called Trump's GOP, quote, kind of creepy.
Well, kind of creepy. Kinzinger. Imagine that. He gets rewarded for following orders from who? Federal agencies? Who's on CNN? Who are those people? We already know there's some connections to federal agencies on CNN, a propaganda wing. But before we conclude, let's ask this question. How much more can this country take? How much more can you take? Ashley's husband knows the pain many of you don't want to ever know or feel of his wife being, the word, murdered. And the Capitol Police officer who murdered her gets away with it. I wonder if a race thing has a little bit to play in there. And then they all get rewarded. And the other question is, what does Rudy have? What does Rudy have for him to be able to make that statement that they should all be in jail? Now, if you listen to that whole clip, I mean, he gives you his background. If you don't know who Rudy Giuliani is, he was the first one to successfully prosecute RICO. So for him to say that he's got evidence, you may want to listen. He doesn't know how to play his cards close to his vest. So will we get justice, like Kevin McCarthy said? Or did he have to hold his feet to the fire to get those committees put in, as we showed you in part one? And to get these commitments that the holdouts, that everyone says was so terrible how they hold it out. Well, I hope you enjoyed the beginning of our first clip from Dan Bongino in part one. We pointed right to where these people are. So we hope we will sit to watch this and take it more as a tribute to Ashley Babbitt for being that one service member who gave the ultimate sacrifice to protect her nation and the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic. In part three, well, you'll get to understand a little bit more. With that, we'll conclude part two.